Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am here today with a very special guest. He's feared at the table, famous on the internet, and probably the most renowned Drukhari player in the global 40K community. I think that's fair. Allow me to introduce Skari, the host of the Scarredcast YouTube channel and all-around excellent human being. Thanks so much for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Hello, Brent. I always knew that the Craftworlders would have me infiltrate them eventually. It was the long play, you see.
No, I suspect you of
too kind.
planning to crack my soul stone and feed my essence to Slanesh for a laugh. Like, I know where we are, but I admire what you do. I admire your work. Despite the fact that you are 40K famous, I do think it's possible that some of our viewers maybe don't know about who you are and all of the really cool stuff that you've done, the content you create for the community. So I was hoping before we dive into faction talk, maybe you could talk a little bit about Scarredcast and who you are and your role in the 40K community.
Well, thank you so much. You are too kind, of course, and flattery is the way to get into an Archon's inner circle. So I do appreciate the kind words. Well, I've been doing 40K content for about 10 years, I want to say. However, I've only started doing it full time for the last 2 years. So I have the Scarredcast YouTube channel, a blog, all that stuff, and most of the stuff I do is like on Patreon or writing articles. I'm a coach on the Art of War coaching program. And I'm a member and assistant captain of the Team Canada World Team Championship 40K team. So I've been a member since 2018. So sorry, I've been a part of the team since 2018. And I do mainly Drukhari content, which is why I'm like a niche within a niche, if that makes sense. Like I'm very like faction focused, which of course right now is fabulous because we've got a firecracker of a codex. However, I've been doing it through thick and thin. I play Black Templars. I do have a Craftworld army that's painted in my mirror. So I have my Revenant Titan sitting right up there.
Nice.
Just behind my shoulders. There you go. See?
Beautiful.
It's one of my favorite miniatures. And and I'm just really excited to talk 40K. I guess I specialize in 40K mentality more than anything. Being able to separate like your emotion from the game in like good and bad. Like when you're having a tough time, being able to like keep a clear head to make conscious decisions on the tabletop. But at the same time, I love narrative gaming as much as I'm a competitive gamer. Like I'll play Crusade every day. Like I love just like narrative games and stuff. But I'm a very competitive gamer. Like I love the chess aspect of it. Very tight technical gameplay. It's like I love that like mental like sword fighting that happens. It's fantastic. So that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, that's great. I like that you did a shout out to narrative play too, because I do think that that's a big, obviously, part of the hobby. And sometimes in these competitive articles and websites and podcasts, that thing that I think draws a lot of people to the hobby initially gets lost. So I think that's
100%
super cool.
And to be honest, as something I even like tell people, if you want to play competitively, play a narrative or two. It's crazy how square some competitive players can be, and you sort of have to like kick them in the butt to like think creatively, and you do that by putting them in situations that are not balanced at all, right? Like protect this bunker from a bunch of dudes with melted guns or something, you know what I mean? And like you have to like think outside the box to make something happen, and it gives you the like little creative tools that you can put in your toolbox that kind of give you like problem solving ability on the table, like when you go to a tournament, for example.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. In fact, I think before we talk competitive, I think it would be cool if we touched on narrative aspects of Drukhari and lore. I mean, I would be very interested to know what it is about Drukhari as a faction initially drew you to them, and maybe like as a Craftworld Eldar player, why should I be excited about, from a narrative perspective, a lore perspective, why should I be excited about Drukhari?
Well, that's a
I know it's a deep
sharp line to be walking on there. You monkish cousins, you.
I'm committed to the path. It's okay.
It's funny because Aspect Warriors is some of the most like raging Eldari. Like they have just like this built-in like they just want to murder everything. Like aspect warriors.
Kane is a
literally
cruel
have,
mistress.
like,
It's true.
yeah. Like, have you ever read Jane Czar?
Yeah.
The Black
Love
Lives
it.
book?
Love it.
Fabulous book.
So
Really
good.
love that. Like, especially with all the cool narrative part of the, like, all the Dark Eldar stuff and meeting Vect and all this stuff. No spoilers, but like, it's a great book if you haven't read it already. Narratively speaking, what drew me to the Drukhari was I had the models because I started in the 3rd edition. Starter box was Black Templars and Dark Eldar, and so I had some models lying around. And secondly, I love the idea of just like very fast, hard-hitting pirates that couldn't take a punch, and I thought that was really fun. I love that whole idea of raiding, like, sun's going down, the rays of the of the sun going down, and all of a sudden like this webway opens and like all these pirates show up and like just raid and like leave, and everybody's like, what the hell just happened? We where'd everybody go? I don't know. They got taken back to somewhere terrible. So
I do love that like unseelie elf aspect of Drukhari. Like in folklore, the notion that fey creatures abduct children for terrible reasons and like turn them into art or to power their doomsday devices, and that's like definitely, that's not Craftworld, but that is definitely where Drukhari are.
Don't take your baby and change it for a changeling.
Yeah,
Like,
right. Exactly. I think that's
yeah.
I love that. I think that's great. In a creepy and terrible way.
Terrible and creepy. Awesome.
So
I think I've been playing them for too long.
Yeah, once you start to, but everybody's a bad guy in 40K. I mean, right? Like, it's not we craft worlders maybe on our moral high horse here, but like Bill Tanner. I mean,
Eldrad is one of the most conniving,
he is
like galaxy-spanning puppet masters, like, and on par with Vect. Like Vect is like puppet mastering, and Eldrad is like literally Vect style, but like for the whole universe. That's why like
it's fair.
As though Craftworld's like.
No, it's totally fair. Yeah, I don't know how much we get to be we get to snub your sociopathy, but nevertheless, I think some Craftworld players, right, watching the video might not actually be aware that Drukhari are essentially 3 factions within a faction plus hired blades. So maybe if you could kick us off by just talking about Cabals, witch cults, covens, very generally, not naming specific units, just who they are in the lore, and then very briefly how they play on the table tactically.
So you have the 3 factions. The first one's the homunculus covens. Think of them as like the medical, crazy scientist doctors of the Drukhari. They're the ones that essentially create and mold flesh monsters, right? So you're looking at them being usually tougher on the tabletop, with like more like the Wraith Lord style constructy tough things, and like some cool abilities and rules that kind of like reflect that in a way. Then you've got the witch cults. The witch cults are gladiators, basically, of the Dark City. So think close combat, think speed, think hard hitting, and think like especially speed, and just like lots of close combat attacks. Like that's what witches do, and make sure you shoot them. Don't shoot them if you can. And then Cabalites, which is like the main, what you would consider the normal Drukhari armies, or Cabals, like Archons and Cabalite Wars. They're like your guardians, basically, like the Eldar equivalent of a guardian, just a little bit more dangerous and with better rules right now. But I'm assuming not a farmer with a gun, which is kind of what guardians are.
There are also poets with guns and scholars with guns.
Okay, fair enough.
People who make origami with guns. Yeah.
And
we have those too.
The warlock in your squad who will tell you what to do.
That's true.
That's a thing from before. You can't do that anymore.
I know. Yeah, sad times there, but maybe we'll get back there.
Yeah, that'd be cool if you could. So yeah, Cabalites are more like just a generic, foot troops with Archons, and then of course you got the mercenaries, which is like a whole other aspect of it. Essentially, you have like durability, close combat, and shooting. It's like really like the 3 main sort of like facets of each one of them. Although shooting, they can all do shooting, they can all do combat, but in broad terms.
Right. So just to be totally clear for players who might still be not quite picking up what we're putting down, covens, witch cults, and cabals don't mix in a detachment except in one very special and specific way that we'll talk about later.
Well, they can mix. They just you lose their obsessions. Though one of the factions lose their obsession, which we'll get to in a second. But there is one way that you can mix them all, where they all kind of benefit from mixing.
Yeah, you can't mix without a significant sacrifice, right? So I think that certainly as a Craftworld player, looking at Drukhari, what we're going to be, from a tactical perspective, what we're going to be looking at doing is trying to compensate maybe for some of the things that Craftworlds don't excel at. I think anytime we want to take allies, one sort of obvious direction to go or reason to do that is to try to compensate for something that maybe your core army doesn't do well. So from my perspective, I think Craftworlders really struggle to play the primary objective game. I think that's one of the reasons why they aren't seeing a lot of play on the table in big tournaments, certainly not successful play. It's a real problem. So if that's something Drukhari could help with, I think that would be pretty awesome. There might also be synergies that Craftworlders have access to, that ways in which Craftworld units can be made even better by running with Drukhari. That, you know,
I'm talking about souping here. Like how do you Dark Eldar, like within a Craftworld unit? Yeah, there are lots of very good options. If you're a Craftworlder who wants to get more bang for your buck in terms of the game, there's some units, there's some detachments, there's some like elements, some obsessions like Craftworld like rules or whatever. You can kind of ally in to help you like shore up the holes that you might have in your Craftworld list.
Sure. Yeah. So I have two big concerns about doing this, right? Like, I'm very excited to do this as a Craftworlds player. I've been trying it a lot on the table recently since the new codex came out. And my first concern is that Drukhari don't have access when they soup to power from pain, which is this very powerful force multiplier. It creates all these great synergies. Is it fair to say it's a little bit like, I guess is it like combat doctrines, but they stay in effect throughout the game? So over the course of the game, every turn you get a new bonus. You start with your invuln, and I think they basically get more durable and better at melee as the game goes.
It's a combination of things. It become like it's of power from pain is 5 bonuses, 1 per turn. 2 of them are the invulnerable save that increases over time, right? So turn 1 and turn 4 goes from a 6 up to a 5 up. Just means everything in a Dark Eldar army normally will have some sort of invulnerable save. So it doesn't matter how much AP you have, doesn't matter if you're shooting or combat, like they will normally get a save of some sort. And then you've got a +1 to hit in close combat on turn 3, and then vehicles can shoot better in close combat with heavy weapons. And then on turn 2, they get advance and charge faction-wide, which is really, really powerful. Like the speed that gives is nuts. When you've got Reaver jet bikes moving with combat drugs, like up to 20 inches with combat drugs, or doubled up to 22, advancing 8 inches advancing. That's a 30-inch movement, and then charging after that. Yeah, like it's crazy.
So good. Eviscerating flyby in there as you go by, too. Like, but of course, if you're a Craftworld player souping in Drukhari, you don't get that cool stuff, right? Because you don't get power from pain. So I think that's an obstacle. And then if you do want to mix units, you lose the obsessions. And I think a lot of the really sort of brutal synergies you can get going with Drukhari probably also rely on the obsessions. So as we talk about branching out as a Craftworlds player and trying to run a soup list, those are obvious obstacles that we're going to be working around. And I was hoping that maybe we could talk about each of those 3, right? Covens, witch cults, cabals, and then also the hired blades, and where you think the best opportunities are for Craftworld players souping. First of all, one of those in is a mono, so we keep the obsession. And then maybe at the end we can talk about real space raider detachments once we have a general sense of what maybe broad options are.
Oh yeah, 100%. So let's start with. So I definitely believe that if you're going to soup in Drukhari into your Craftworld Eldar list, there are some clear winners that don't lose too much from getting souped in.
Yeah.
And there are some that, souping them in doesn't really give you much benefit. So let's start with, first and foremost, the Coven, right? So the coven gives you, like, you lose the 6-up invulnerable save on everybody if you soup it in. Now that is a big deal, because you literally have like 0 save. You have a 5-up feel no pain, which means you can sort of like bring them in. The reason you'd probably bring the coven in is because of a few obsessions. Namely, there's one called Dark Techno Monsters, which allows you to have some very good short-range damage dealing through flamers that have +1 to wound and are AP2 and get an extra damage with the obsession. So you'd be looking at little 60-point units, which is a great objective secured unit from a Craftworld perspective. That is, toughness 4, has a 5 of feel no pain, and has 2 D6 flamers that are 12 inches. They auto hit. They're strength 4, AP2, but then they're +1 to wound and 2 damage. So they're great at killing Marines. They're great at killing like tanks. They do everything for like 60 points. So you can put in this like detachment quite easily in a Craftworld unit, in the Craftworld army, with maybe a transport or 2, and then have some like dedicated damage dealing that doesn't require you to like roll to hit or anything like that.
Right.
So that's from the coven perspective. There's also so that's probably the best one.
Can we just pause for a second on the covens? Can you maybe name some specific units for people who just don't know?
Yep. So you have the homunculus, which are the HQs. They're just a buff character, essentially. Right. Has a couple of cool things, access to some fun relics and warlord traits. They're like a toolkit character, essentially, if you were thinking of like a type of character that can kind of pick and choose. Has some decent close combat capability, but nothing like crazy. You've got the racks with the troops, which I just talked about. Grotesques are like your Wraith Guard equivalent, except they're probably more efficient for the points right now, right? So they're like Blade Guard, like your blade, your Wraith Blades. Then you've got the Talos and the Kronos, and those 2 units are like your Wraith Lords, but in units. Instead of like a single one walking around, you'd have a unit, 3 of them. They can have like flamers and meltaguns and or heat lances, or like haywire cannons and things like that. So you can have like a durable core. However, I would just stick to like the troop choices, because when you sub in like coven, Wraith Lords and like Wraith Seers tend to fit that role better. And and you're the points you're spending on those things would probably go better to like those sorts of units.
So you think the racks are the way forward for CWE players who want a soup coven?
Yep. Yeah, to be honest, because you lose like that, you feel no pain. Like you lose the invul save, you lose the advancing charge, you lose the, there's a lot of stuff that you're missing out by taking a coven, right? They kind of lose quite a bit, especially on those what are supposed to be durable units, and you're paying like 100 and some points for like these like little mini, like these Talos, right? Which are the like monsters basically, or the grotesques. You're paying like 35 points of grotesque. You might as well get some like extra shining spears in there, or like some more shadow specters or something else that's gonna like synergize better, and then just have more troops, because Craftworld Eldar don't really have the best troops. No, these are troops that can go out and do damage, and actually do damage effectively to kill Marines, especially. They can go in and just roast a unit of intercessors, and that sort of thing, right? So it's useful to have, fill some gaps.
Yeah, to be honest, I was really bummed about initially about the coven rules, because as a Craftworld player, because I have 9 Talos in my collection, I was so counting on playing the OPSEC game hard with those guys, and it sounds like that's not a great move, and that's kind of what I was suspecting. So bummer, but the racks are super cool. They're cool models, and
well, the models are great. They've got good. If you want to do sniper rifles, you could do hex rifles, and then run them with Dark Techno Monster as well to get like a strength 6 sniper rifle that does like D3 damage +3. +1. So it's like 2 to 4 damage, and it has +1 to wound, and it can snipe out characters. So like you could literally have like one of these take like a minor character out in one shot. So there's like awesome. There's some pretty so there's like there are options, right? So there's options in that list. The second one are the Cabals. Now the Cabal detachments, losing power from pain, advanced isn't really that big of a deal. But the reason you'd probably put a Cabal in your list is for an Archon, which is the HQ, and giving them like a warlord trait that would allow them to have a unit fight last that they're in combat with. So having the ability to have a fight last thing, you can kind of do that with the Humongous Coven as well with a relic if you want to do it that way. But in this case, it's just a cheap Archon. You can like get into combat stuck in with some of your close combat units and like force an enemy unit to fight last, like Sisters of Battle Repentia, or like a unit that's going to get really aggressive and into your lines. So it's nice to have that as a toolbox in your back pocket. As for everything else, you're probably taking Cabalites as to put in some like very cheap troops. 5 Cabalite warriors is 40 points, right? So if you want to do like some MSU style troops, or put a couple of Venoms in your list, or a couple of Raiders which are the big boat looking tank transports, and you want to add them into your list to give you some multiple small unit style objectives secured. It can like move around the table, take objectives, or contest objectives from the enemy without sacrificing your more expensive Eldar units.
Which is so great.
Right?
A Wave Serpent is 150 points. What's a Venom? Like 75 or something? I mean, it's such a good deal.
Venom is 75 with 1 cannon, and then you've got and then a Raider is 85 with a Dark Lance, which is a steal, right? So 100%.
And we should also say those are open. So those are open tops, right? So you've got the additional firepower, which is
so they can shoot from inside of them as well, so you don't lose the firepower. They're very, very fast. They're maneuverable. Of course, having access to a Drukhari detachment gives you access to all the stratagems in the Drukhari Codex. So you'd have access to, putting a transport back into deep strike, for example, or back into reserve, and then coming in and outflank later in the game. There's lots of cool technical things that you'll get with souping, and then Craftworld would be more used for something like that, or adding in cheap anti-tank weaponry like Raiders for Dark Lances, or the ability to advance and charge. Oh well, sorry, they wouldn't get that because they don't get feel no pain. They don't get power from pain. But like a Ravager, for example, which is like a three Dark Lances on a little anti-tank weapon, like an anti-tank flying platform. So that's what you would use them for. And then last but not least, you have witches. Now, in my opinion, witches and the Blades for Hire are some of the best things you can soup in.
Can we just can I ask a question about Cabals first?
Yeah.
So on your you did a codex review, right, on Scarredcast, which was super cool. It was the long game. It's a deep dive on everything, and in that you were really enthusiastic about the Blackheart Cabals, right? Which is one of the sub faction bonuses. We were talking about Dark Technomancers before. That's kind of like expert crafters, right? For Eldar players, it's like a custom Craftworld trait. Well, for your Cabals, right? You'd be choosing some sort of faction identity. And I feel like your go-to sounded like Blackheart, but it seems like because the Blackheart bonus is sort of better power from pain, and we don't get that if we're souping them in, can you suggest maybe an identity for our soup Cabals that might be more competitive?
Now, I personally, I linked up an article to a full in-depth Drukhari Tactica that I did. It's like 30 pages with the Drukhari Tactica, like Goonhammer style. Nice. So if it's something you want to take a look at, you can. So the Cabals, one of the best ones to use when you're souping in my opinion, is the Cabal of the Poison Tongue, which allows you to redeploy basically and put units back into reserve for free once you use the redeployment stratagem. It's like having an additional, phantasm with all your Drukhari stuff, that then you could put them into reserve if they're like exposed and might get shot off the table first turn, or like change them from one flank to another or whatever. And I feel that's probably my favorite. And then they have the ability to force additional attrition tests or additional attrition modifiers on units that take a casualty from a poison weapon. When they shoot a poison weapon at a unit, they lose a model from poison, which is only good against certain factions. Like Marines don't suffer attrition modifiers, for example. But like if you're playing Guard or Sisters of Battle or Necrons, having like another modifier on attrition can add up over the course of the game. It also makes things like your poison weapons, like the little Cabalite poison rifles, that normally wound on 4s, or the venoms, right? If you're using like MSU style, you want to put in like 3 venom transports with 15 Cabalite warriors and an Archon. It makes all of that poison wound on 3s, which then just increases the damage output, makes that point investment more efficient in your Craftworld list.
Okay, so it sounds like for Cabals, we're thinking Poison Tongue, the Archon who is a pretty cheap character who can jump out and mug somebody for serious damage. The Cabalites, which are essentially like if Guardians were good, and they can go in open top transports, which gives us better objective control, which is something we really need. Poison Tongue sounds like a great pick. There's a way to, for I think an extra 2 points per model, make one up to 10-man unit of Cabalites.
Trueborn.
Like, yes, Trueborn, and now they hit on 2s, and you can give them a bunch of special weapons, and this seems like it's got some play. The other thing go ahead.
You have to upgrade your Archon first.
Right.
So your Archon has to be upgraded to what's called a Master Archon. So it's just a point. It's like making an apothecary a Master Apothecary. In the Space Marine book, and then you can pick one character in a detachment to do that, and then one unit of Cabalites in that detachment can be turned into a unit of Trueborn. If you do that, though, I highly recommend you invest in the full 10, and you go for like a full loadout of like 2 special weapon blasters, which are like melta-guns, right? 1 dark lance. Because the cool thing about Trueborn is they hit on 2+ ballistic skill and don't suffer modifiers. So there's no minuses to hit. They just hit on 2s. And you put them in a raider, and you just fly around shooting stuff, and it's really fun.
Yeah, no,
they're like one of my favorites.
I ran them for the first time last night in a game against Crimson Fists, and they were just MVPs. And they're not that expensive, even with all those upgrades. It's a pretty cheap squad. It was really, it was fabulous. I have
it's about 200 points, 200 and some points with the raider included. So definitely like worth it in my opinion.
It's still less than 10 Guardians and a Wave Serpent, which isn't anywhere near the utility. So I think that's a win. So Nick on Tuesday, Nick Nanavati on the Art of War said that he thinks that there is an argument for the Court of the Archon models and so the Court of the Archon is this like special group of sort of wacky mutant goons that follow the Archon around and protect him and are cool in melee. And there's been a lot of debate online about whether or not this is actually a viable Cabal unit. Do you think Nick is right about this, that it's a cheap unit that could help with objective control, or are you of a different mind?
Well, it is an efficient. See, a lot of the times competitive players like Nick, like Siegler, like Nick, like myself even, like we look at point per wound.
Right, of course, yeah.
And we're looking at the efficiency of points per wound. Now it's and then of course you want to see like how much damage a unit can do. But when it comes to the Court of the Archon, 8 models, so about 136 points or something like that, right? Or 34 points, 134 points, 138 points. Anyway, but it's 8 models with 3 wounds each that have a 5+ feel no pain, like shrug damage. So what you're looking at is 24 wounds for 130 some points. So you're paying like 6 points a wound or something like that. Like you're paying like nothing per wound, almost like 5.3 points per wound that has a 5+ feel no pain. Now this really helps in certain matchups, and the best part is they all go into one transport. So it's like you have a transport that can carry 11 models carrying 24 wounds.
Right.
Right. So you can really get them to a place that you need them to be. And then it's just, it's not like they don't kill more than a unit of witches will kill. Like witches will go in and murder something. They have a decent amount of attacks. They've got decent AP. Like they have okay strength. Like they're okay at combat. The biggest strength they have is they're more of a tar pit. Right. So, they can soak up mortal wounds, which I think was one of the biggest things that you sort of need in this edition right now, is the ability to lower the amount of mortal wounds you're taking. And they are one of those units that doesn't matter where the wound comes from, they have a 5-up ignore damage. So 1/3 of all the damage they're taking is just going to get ignored, right? And they've got 3 wounds each. So you have to do 4 wounds before you lose an effective model.
Right.
So that's like you technically have to do, or sorry, you have to lose. Yeah, so on average, you need to take like 2 smites before you lose a single model from that unit. So that unit can like soak up a lot of that sort of like damage and force your opponent to either shoot them or get stuck in with them in close combat and like lose a phase to do damage in, if that makes sense. So all in all, it does like it's an efficient use of points. Now you need an Archon for it, and so you have to like take an Archon first. Now, without Power from Pain, they do lose the invulnerable save, so their durability does go down slightly. But the fact that they have a 5-up shrug wounds tends to offset that, right? Which is kind of what you're looking at. Cheap wounds that are hard to chew through. If you spike those rolls, like say you have a good bout of rolling and you roll a bunch of 5-ups, all of a sudden like your opponent's damage like variance, like the average dice rolls, just takes it for a loop, and now their whole plan is messed up for the turn. And that's the benefit of a unit like that.
One thing Craftworld does not have is cheap wounds that are hard to chew through.
Right.
So I wonder if that might not have some play for us, even if it's not necessarily an obvious move for every Drukhari player. It sounds like it might work for us.
Well, 100%. Like personally, I would run them, but I don't own the models. Like, and as much as like TTS is fun and you can test things out, like I tend to play with stuff I own and I have painted. So a lot of my crazy meta lists are more that I've forced myself to play with stuff because I own it.
Gotcha. Yep.
Okay. So I don't own 4 Slith and 4 Urgles. I own 2 Urgles and 1 Slith. So I could make like a weird Court of the Archon list with like some ad hoc miniatures, but I don't have the like efficient version.
Got it.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Witches. Do you want to talk witches?
Yeah. So witches, I like witches souping in because of the fact that they are the ones that lose the least from Power from Pain.
Okay.
They already have invulnerable saves from shooting and close combat because of their dodge rule, basically. They lose, the biggest one they lose out on is is advance and charge. So that is one that can be a little annoying. However, they keep their combat drug bonuses. So which units can either pick, when you're building a list, you can either pick one of 6 special rules or like stat buffs that you can give a unit. You can build a unit and give it +1 weapon skill, +1 attack when it charges, +1 strength, +1 toughness, +1 weapon skill, or +1 ballistic skill with +1 leadership. Right, so there's 6 different things you can give a witch unit. And you can either pick one, whichever one you want for your witch unit, or you can roll for 2 differently every game. So every game, you can pick one or roll for 2. It has to be built into your list, however. And that is not a bonus they lose if you soup. So they lose very little from the loss of Power from Pain, which is one of the reasons I also like them in Ari, but that's like on a completely different topic. But it means that you have cheap troops. They're quite good. They're 10 points each. They have lots of attacks in close combat. They have an invulnerable save, so they're durable. They're the unit Banshees wishes they were, basically.
Oh yes.
So if you like that style of play where you want to get aggressive or that sort of thing, witches are the thing for you. They also have a fantastic rule called No Escape, which can trap enemy units in close combat. And essentially, if an enemy unit wants to run away from you, they have to win a roll-off. So you and your opponent just roll off. If you tie, you re-roll. If your opponent wins, they get to run away. If you win, just hold them in combat, and they cannot fall back.
So good.
And that is incredibly powerful. So powerful. And the thing is, this rule affects vehicles, it affects monsters, it affects infantry, it affects any unit that is not Titanic. So you can hold a rhino in combat with a bunch of witches and then keep them safe from getting shot at, other than the Stormbolter on the rhino. But I mean, it's such a powerful rule. And I think that synergizes really well with, say, Craftworld, where they can put in a lot of mortal wounds, like Executioner and Smites and things. So you can hold something in combat, potentially kill it in your psychic phase, and then charge something else with the witches. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many different things you can do with that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I feel like there's a great opportunity to play the objective game with witches just by tying opponents' units up before they can get to objectives, instead of trying to stand on do it the Space Marine way, where you march up and you stand there and you don't die for a turn. And so the board control I feel like that witches offer is probably huge for a CWE player. Could you also talk a little bit about Hellions and Reavers, what they are and how they function in a witch cult detachment?
So Reaver jet bikes and Hellions are like the speed. They're like just as killy in close combat as anything else. They're like a jet bike, right? So they've got extra wounds, they've got extra toughness, and they have incredible speed. Like, Hellions are great. They have 2 damage each. They've got decent AP, lots of attacks, and they fly. Like, both of these units fly, which means you have fast, mobile infantry or biker units that can go out and reach someone and put a lot of pressure on your opponent. The speed is quite good. The table is smaller, so their speed is like greatly enhanced. They can go and like kill a unit on objective mainly, or pin your opponent in their zone and prevent them from getting closer to you, which then gives you space or room to then shoot them with Dark Reapers and things like that. Now, one of the reasons I love Reaver jet bikes and Hellions is their access to a stratagem called Eviscerating Flyby, which is really, really good.
So good.
You essentially move a unit of Reavers or move a unit of Hellions and pick a unit, an enemy unit, that your unit moved or advanced over. Now, of course, if you're souping in, you're probably never going to advance and do it. You're going to move over, right? And remember, it doesn't have to be in a straight line. You can literally go up and touch them and then come right back the way you came. You don't have to end on over them or anything like that. Like, it's just moved over them and then doubled back and came back the same way. So you literally have a unit of Hellions or Reavers behind a wall, go and touch something, come back behind the wall. It's really fun. Anyway, so then you use the Eviscerating Flyby, and you roll a dice for every model in your Reaver or Hellion unit against the enemy unit. On a 5+, they do a mortal wound. If the enemy unit you're targeting is infantry, you do it on a 4+. And only one of your models has to have touched them, and you roll for every single one of the models in the unit. If you have a 20-strong Hellion unit, then you can get one Hellion to basically touch an enemy unit, roll 20 dice for 2 CP. And if it's an infantry unit, that's on 4s. You do mortal wounds. So it's an average of 10 mortal wounds.
Is this just an incredible way to assassinate characters also? I mean...
Yeah. Space Marine Apothecary, I see you, and these Reaver jet bikes are going to murder you before you even, like, come at... does your opponent have Blade Guard veteran, like any of the Victrix Honor Guard or Company Champions? Or does your Necron opponent love their little Crypto Thralls or Lich Guard and you can't shoot any of his characters? Just fly with them with a bunch of Reaver jet bikes and Hellions and force them to, like, try and resurrect them with CPs and stuff. So that's one reason you bring them in. Now, especially for Hellions. Secondly, Reaver jet bikes are one of the best tools you can add to your army to deal with Satan, especially if you're playing into Necrons. Because of Eviscerating Flyby, they can do mortal wounds in the movement phase. Then you can shoot the Satan in the shooting phase. It can be equipped with Grav Talons that can do mortal wounds in the charge phase, and then you can also combat the Satan. It gives you 4 different phases to impact the Satan, which means you only need to do 2 wounds per phase to kill a Satan, or and then 1 do 3 wounds or whatever. It means that that one unit can kill a Satan in a single turn, which can, or say Gazgul or something that you need multiple phases to do damage with, which is one of the best tools you can have in the meta right now, considering Satan are like all over the place. And those are the 2 main parts. Then you have beast packs and stuff like that, which aren't really that popular, but they give you another one of those efficient point per wounds kind of units with the Razorwing Flocks. So you could put them in more like screening, getting engaged on all front points, and just cheap like move blockers that can like fly up to a spot and like annoy the opponent's movement, essentially.
Yeah, no, I mean, I also, the other thing, that's fabulous. I think it's super powerful. I also think it synergizes really well with Craftworld stuff, because Craftworlds typically want to play engage on all fronts. Maybe we have some scramblers action going on, and so the ability to be all over the board, right? It's it fits that play style that that we already want. But those models are so effective, and they're so much more points efficient than a lot of the stuff that CWE is running. It sounds like it has a lot of game. Can you talk a little bit about the succubus? And you have like a succubus focus video, and then in the codex review, you talked about making like monster killer succubi, especially with the new Cult of Strife Warzone rules. What can she do for us?
So the succubus is like the boogeyman right now. They are incredibly cheap and incredibly killy in like a very small unit on a 25 mil base. You know, like they just run in and just like blend stuff and like run away. So succubuses can be built to do combat in lots of different ways. However, in order to make some of the more crazy combos, you have to make them the warlord, which then means that like you would have to like give up your like Craftworld warlord stuff or whatever you wanted to soup them in. However, the Cult of Strife detachment, which is in the Book of Rust, that one gives you access to some warlord traits and relics that really sort of like amp up the succubus to like 11. You know, and mixing and matching some of these can give you some very effective countercharge units. So once your opponent, or like something that you can put pressure on the opponent, but mainly if you're using them in a Craftworld list, you're using them to like deter the opponent from getting too close, right? And then using that distance to your advantage, right? And a lot of a lot of the Craftworld is about this. You want to keep that space between you to use your movement to your advantage. So you can have a like Dark Lotus Toxin, which is a relic for a succubus, +1 strength, +1 damage for a weapon. Now that can be given to like a regular weapon for a succubus that doubles her number of attacks. So now she's, instead of 6 base attacks, she's 12 hit rolls in close combat with something called Razor Flails. And they're all +1 strength, +1 damage. And then on top of that, you can give her combat drugs, which then means you could technically have her up to 14 hit rolls, because it's 7 attacks, the 14 hit rolls. So you have a 60-point model with 14 strength 4, like 2 damage, -1, -2 on 6s to wound, like damage rolls, right? Now that's just the relic. Then you can give her a warlord trait, and that could be anything from, you know, depending on what cult you're taking, but it could be every 6 to hit counts, gives you 2 additional hits. So I'm going in with 14 attacks, and every 6 is 2 more hits. Or you could go for competitive edge, which is for every attack that doesn't damage your opponent, so you miss, you fail to wound, or they save, you get to attack again with the weapon, right? Which right now has led to I feel it's going to get FAQ'd, but I think that's one of the first things to get FAQ'd. But just in the state of understanding it, if you want to try it while it's still legal, take this competitive edge with the Razor Flails. So she has 14 attacks. So she hits on 2s, and say she misses 3. So you put 3 aside. I've hit with 11. So then I'm wounding your Space Marine toughness 4 on 4s, and I wound, say, 6 times. So, 5 of those dice get put. So now I've missed with 8. And now you take saves. So you have 3 up saves. So you pass, 3 of them out of 6 because you rolled well. And then so 3 of them go back into the pool. So I have 11 dice that didn't do damage. And you took 3 wounds, or 2 damage. So now I get to roll attacks again. Because of my Razor Flails, they double. So now I roll 22 hit rolls. Which then gets crazy.
So good.
So she can by herself go in and murder, has the potential to murder, pretty much any unit in the game. Or you can make her do mortal wounds. Like go in with 14 attacks with precision blows. It's a warlord trait. Every 6 to hit turns the damage of the weapon into a number of mortal wounds equal to the damage of the weapon. So you can go in with 14 attacks that are 2 damage each, and every 6 just does 2 mortal wounds. And I've gone in and I've rolled 5 6s sometimes. That's 10 mortal wounds. She just goes in and goes, and everything dies. Right? That's especially useful in matchups against Custodes or Space Marines or things with lots of invulnerable saves or things that are tough, right? Or that have damage reduction. because you don't reduce the damage because they're taking mortals. So you can go into dreadnoughts and you can go into like Death Guard and things like that. So it gives you like a little toolkit that you can use. It's this sort of like really helps you in some of the tougher matchups that you might have.
It's she has just so much, especially I think with the Cult of Strife stuff. She has so much potential. The other thing about this, it gives me hope that when Craftworld Eldar get their 9th edition codex,
it's gonna be busted.
That maybe Jane Czar will be good, because I feel like if that's the Succubus, what does Jane Czar look like? I'm
Drazzar. Look at Drazzar.
I'm ever hopeful.
If you want to see what Jane Czar does, look at Drazzar. It seems like they're really trying to make the Phoenix Lords do something fantastic. And to be honest, looking at special characters, Drazzar is a great character to soup in.
Yeah.
Because for the point cost that you get, you just get Drazzar. You get a 3 damage totem mega killing machine that fights twice in every combat. And goes in and has a 4-up invul, is tough, has decent amount of wounds, good armor save, and you'll just go in and like usually delete something. So like if you want to kind of take a comparison of what they seem to be wanting to take Phoenix Lords into, look at Drazzar, see what he does. I think that's the template for what we're going to see Karandras and Azraman, Jane Czar do. Like I think we'll be pleasantly surprised.
I'm so hopeful. I'm really excited. It's been a long time in the cold for some of those the models too, man. When some of those models came out, I was
the old 80s sculpts.
Yeah. It's crazy. I think so you're just talking about Drazzar. It seems like I feel like if you were a CWE player interested in messing with Drukhari and you were sort of terrified by the sheer cornucopia of options and possibilities and obsessions and sub-factions and combos, one really like safe way to get in would be to get Drazzar and like 5 incubi and stick them in a venom with whatever you need, like maybe some Cabalites or something. Is that, do you feel like that's a reasonable
It just depends on what you want. Do you want countercharge? Do you want board presence? Do you want damage dealing at range? Like you have to understand, like, you have to look at your Craftworld Eldar, say 1,500 points worth of your Craftworld Eldar. Right. And that would be like the core of your army. And then use like 500 points to put in, or 500 to 600 points to put in something from Drukhari that's going to give you that little bit of oomph that you need to kill something specific, right? Based on your matchups. So if you need like anti-tank killing, then maybe you want to go for some Dark Lances on some Raiders or Ravager to make sure that you can kill tanks at range, or Dreadnoughts. Say your friends have lots of Dreadnoughts. Well, anything that's D3 plus 3 damage will kill a Dreadnought. Where's your -1 damage now? Right? You're taking a minimum of 3 damage. So you've got that's one aspect. The second one is, and this, I want to stress this highly enough, no matter what you decide to take, make sure you're putting mandrakes in your detachment.
So good.
Mandrakes are just like, like Rangers used to do it, where you could like forward deploy, right? And apparently that was retconned, which means that you need mandrakes to forward deploy and stop your opponent from coming at you, like putting Nurglings in the middle of the table, and like putting a bunch of Invictor tactical war suits like forward deploying up in your face, or that whole Necron army that has a free move before the game starts. Like you can use mandrakes to like stop the line and just have like a line of mandrakes. Nice. All you need is 10, and that usually covers most of the table. Right. But with 10 or so mandrakes, you can kind of like just tell the opponent to chill and stay in their deployment zone, which gives you as a Craftworld player that space that we were talking about, which is like you're not going to get charged by wraiths on turn 1. Right. You have like a turn to like react to them and try to kill them before they get to you.
Yeah, so for Craftworld players who don't know, mandrakes are these like creepy shadow elves that can pull the Warp Spider trick if Warp Spiders take Web of Deceit. So not only do they have a CP-free Deep Strike, but then they can essentially CP-free Deep Strike again. They
don't have the free Deep Strike anymore. They lost
don't?
That.
Okay.
So now they just have a forward deploy, so they can deploy out of the deployment zone, and once per game you can remove them from the table. They don't come back right away like warp spiders do.
They next turn they go into your reserves, right?
They go in next turn, correct?
Right.
Yeah, they just deep strike next turn. Yeah.
Okay, so but nevertheless, so I'm wrong about that. Nevertheless, I think they're also really good at secondaries, right? They're like a much cheaper. If you, 1 5-man are much cheaper than 5 warp spiders. Their shooting is, and they're just better, pretty much in every way. But I think the way you're talking about,
to be hit. Yep.
Yeah, I think the way you're talking about using them
stock.
is probably even better for us though, because we're not good at that, right? We don't have a unit that fills that.
You don't have
slot.
anything that can stop people coming at you. Like, say you're playing Raven Guard, or you're playing Blood Angels, or you're playing. Just think of that one nightmare scenario or aggressive list, and you've built your Craftworld Eldar list, and you want to have some time to buff up your guys with psychic powers, and you want to like get into position, potentially doom and dink a target, and like take it out before like it gets to you or whatever. Like, it just gives you that one turn to like one turn where if they have a pre-game movement or pre-game deployment, like you have space to breathe for that one turn just to get the powers off that you need and get ready and then try and tackle the target instead of literally getting like charged on turn 1.
Oh man, for me it's Admech. Fucking those horse dogs. The Admech horse dogs. They are my nightmare.
Horse dogs, yeah. They go in, they like snipe out your Farseer or whatever. They like fly around, they like pistol your Farseer to death because they've got their
talk about cheap wounds.
And then they like
oh my goodness.
Correct, right? So that's one thing. Like even against that Admech matchup, those Mandrakes go like, no, you stay in your deployment zone, and like you can come kill us right after, but you're staying. This line, this is as far as you go. Which I think is very, very important.
We need it. That's so good. That's so much smarter than how I've been using them. I think. So let's talk about other hired blades, right? So Mandrakes, we've been talking about witch cults and covens and the Cabals, and Mandrakes are hired blades, right? So their deal is that they can. Well, why don't you explain? How do hired blades work?
They can go into any Drukhari detachment without the detachment. Like you basically put them in any Drukhari detachment. Essentially, they're called mercenaries for hire, and it's incubi. You have Mandrakes. And then you also have the Scourge. So I think a Scourge is like another version of Warp Spiders, except you can combine them with like what Fire Dragons do. Like you can give them all anti-tank weapons, or you can give them all anti-infantry weapons, or you can keep them super cheap. More like swooping hawks. Yeah. But like with a gun that actually is better than a swooping hawk gun. Yeah. And you can give them like special weapons and stuff. Now the cool thing is all of them, as well as the witches, don't suffer so much from the loss of power from pain. Right? So incubi do suffer from the advance in charge, and they do lose the invulnerable save. However, they have a 3-up armor save right off the bat. They've got decent strength and AP and all that good stuff, and they already hit on 2, so they don't really need the +1 hit in close combat in a lot of situations. Like Mandrakes, they come with an invulnerable save stock, and their -1 to hit is stock. So they basically just lose the like -1 to hit and fearless later in the game. So it's like they don't really benefit too much from that. So and they're tactically great to have. And then Scourge, they have a 5-up invulnerable save. They have a built-in deep strike, and they have access to you can tool them to have guns in whichever way you want. So they're not really losing much either. So those are like units that you can add in to give you some durability, mobility, or combat potential, like countercharge or whatever. That and a very cheap, like 5 Scourge or 60 points. You know what I mean? And it gives you like a nice, cheap, fast-moving infantry unit that can, deep strike for free, or put up a banner in the mid-board early in the game, or keep back to like, has some anti-infantry units to hose down some like enemy chaff, right? Or give them shredders, which are a fantastic weapon. It's like an 18-inch D6 blast, strength 6, -1 AP gun, which is really good against like larger units of infantry. And that versatility is worth like what you pay for, especially in a allied sort of detachment.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited about the mercenary units. I think there's probably a lot of play there. Could you explain what a real space raider detachment is, and how a CWE player might be able to make use of an allied real space raider detachment?
So a real space raider detachment is a detachment that has an Archon, a Homunculus, and a Succubus. 1 unit of witches, 1 unit of Cabalites, and 1 unit of Rax. aka the minimum sized real space raid detachment is a battalion. So you can make a battalion a real space raid detachment, is what they should have said. However, other than that one like restriction, the Archon has to be the warlord, right? So that's not a restriction. You have to have an Archon warlord that's kind of leading this whole real space raid, and that gives you access to some really cool bonuses, like the fact that you can upgrade each of the characters to be a master, so that you can have each of the troops be like one of the elite troops. You can have Hemoxites, Blood Brides, or Trueborn, which we talked about earlier. Blood Brides and Hemoxites are like the elite version of their troop racks and the witches. And then it changes the Archon to give rerolls to hit to not just Cabal units, to all core units in the real space rated detachment. So now he's giving reroll hit rolls to all the racks and all the witches and all the Cabalites. So it kind of like can buff them as well, which is really cool. Like if you have a bunch of witches around an Archon and a Succubus, the Succubus gives witches reroll ones to wound, like a lieutenant. The Archon in a real space rated gives them rerolls to hit, so then it makes them really efficient at doing damage, right? And then you have access to some cool stuff like Cabal of Blackheart, Writ of the Living Muse could then give them reroll ones to wound and stuff. However, in that detachment, losing, first of all, you have to invest like 300 points right off the bat to make that happen, right? You're spending on the characters and the troops, and then you're spending on a battalion, which means then you want to have to put in something else. So you're spending quite a lot of CP with that right off the bat. And then the power from pain loss, considering you have Cabal and Coven and Witch Cult, like I don't think it's worth as an ally, personally.
Yeah,
I think it's fun, but I don't think it's something that I would like ally in, just because it's like the tax to take it. Like if I'm taking an ally, I want to take like a minimum amount to get the maximum possible, right? So I'd be taking like Drazzar, so I can have like a really or a Succubus to have like a super killy character, some troops to like shore up my MSU, and then like Mandrakes or Scourge or a combination to like be able to have like that board control, and then some tactical options to like deep striking and things like that as well.
Sure. So as let's imagine that we have some viewers here who are Craftworld Eldar players who have a pretty decent Craftworld Eldar collection, or pretty new to Drukhari, and they want to do what you were just talking about, right? They want to make an allied detachment that's going to be effective. Aside from what you just described, what do you think the best sort of entry-level units and entry-level approaches are? And then please tell me there's a way we can play the primary objective game more effectively.
Well, if you want to play the primary objective game effectively, then you'd probably go for like an MSU allied detachment of Dark Eldar. So you'd run, say, 3 squads. You'd run a patrol. You'd probably want to run a Succubus, or if you don't want to make her the warlord, actually, you wouldn't have to. Make her take Drazzar instead, to be honest. I think Drazzar is more akin to what you need. It's like a good counter charge unit that can really just hit really hard. So if you take Drazzar, then take, say, 3 units of 5 witches in Venoms, and then give them all blast pistols to go and kill like tanks or space marines. And then have 2 units of mandrakes, and then maybe a unit of Scourge, right? But you're looking at 50 points, 75 points is 100, so 300, about 400 points. Yeah, looking at about 600 points worth. But I think that gives you little witches to tie up units and take objectives, venoms to really give you the speed and mobility to get engage points easily and to throw away little units and to tie up stuff in close combat. And then a good counter charge, Drazzar, that can go in to like a problem part of the battle line and like turn the tide, like stem the assault of an enemy, like attack basically, and then be able to push out from there.
Nice. So those witch units, I remember reading that there's a way now to give the Hecatrix a relic, right? Is that...
Yes, if you run Cult of Strife.
Yeah.
And if you give her an Agonizer, you can spend a CP to give her what's called Morvane's Agonizer, which is an enhanced way to hold people up in close combat. So the rule that we were talking about, that you roll off to see if you hold people in combat, Morvane's Agonizer is you pick one of the units that you hit with the Morvane's Agonizer, and that unit cannot fall back. There's no roll. It's just they just can't fall back. There's like a guaranteed hold something in close combat. However, you cannot use that against vehicles or Titanic. So that has to be against like infantry or something else.
Do you think that's worth doing in a CWE ally list?
If you're taking like a bigger unit of witches, yes. If you're just taking little 5-strong units of witches, no, because they're probably going to get bolt pistol to death anyway. So you just want you want to keep them cheap.
Okay.
And conserve your CP, because CP is like something you need.
Cool. Yeah. Is there anything that's a total trap for Craftworld's players? Like, is there stuff that we should just definitely stay away from, not be tempted by? Maybe it's really shiny, and on all the websites, the Drukhari players are talking about how great it is. It's amazing. It's so good. It's a must-have, but it just doesn't work for allies, and we need to be wary and careful.
Because the Dark Eldar book is so good right now, I'd say anything you decide to put in from that book is going to help you as a Craftworld Eldar player.
Okay.
So, like, even if it's like a really crappy Dark Eldar unit, putting in a detachment of Dark Eldar.
It's so harsh and a little bit true.
It is. But that's the reality. If you're trying to like elevate the competitive level of your Craftworld Eldar, right? Then sadly, yes, the current state of the game, adding in any sort of Drukhari is going to make your Craftworld Eldar better. and it was the same for Dark Eldar for the longest time. It was like, if you want to make your Dark Eldar game any better, you need to ally in Dark Reapers. You know what I mean? Like that's or War Spiders. Like that's how it is between the soup factions. But you can either resist it and then have like just play harder games, or you can sort of accept it and see what suits your playstyle. Like, I know players who convert all their Dark Eldar models to look like Craftworld models, so that when they soup and mix them, they just look like Craftworld models, but they have really cool rules.
Right.
So
yeah, that's pretty awesome.
You know what I mean?
Someday our Bright Lances, I'm sure we'll do D3 plus
D3 plus 3.
It's going to happen.
Absolutely.
It's coming.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's only a matter of time before that's the case. Yeah.
So is there anything that I haven't asked about that I should have asked about? Advice you want to give to Craftworld Eldar players interested in starting a doomed tryst with cousins from the Dark City?
I think you've covered pretty much the main points. And like we've given everybody, hopefully, is kind of taken an overview of what the different types of Dark Eldar are. Like, if you're more curious, you can do a lot of exploring on your own. Like, one of the best ways to do it is read the stratagems and read the relics and the warlord traits in the Dark Eldar book, and see if there's anything in there that's like, oh, that specific rule right there or that stratagem would be really useful in my local meta. Frank over there or Fred or Bob, like, they play this one unit, and having access to this would be really useful to like be able to play more effectively with like my local like circle of friends or whatever. So take that time, read it over, do some additional research, and then try and fit in units that can use that in your Craftworld list, right? I find, as always, a trap is, as always, don't upgrade Raiders and Venoms, please. Like, upgrade, like, put 1 or 2 upgrades, but don't go around putting, this is the same for a Wave Serpent. Like, you should not be putting, like, 40 points with upgrades on a Wave Serpent. Like, keep it cheap, pick 1 up, maybe 2 upgrades that you know you're going to use pretty much every single time, and then use the other points on other models. Don't, like, please don't. That's like the number one mistake I see.
Maybe vectored engines, and even that is
not
always.
Maybe if you have like a plan, right? Like if you have a plan to like be like, haha, I fooled you. Like, I'm all of the way over here now. Like, then yes, but like, Raiders are 85 points. You can put Grizzly trophies plus 5 points, chains 5 points, Splinter Axe 10 points, Shock Prow 5 points, right? And Phantasm Grenade for 5 points. So you can literally pay 30 extra points on this Raider, right? You do that 3 times, you could have bought another Raider. Like, buy another Raider.
No, it's so true. I appreciate it. I think that's great advice. Here, and Skari's not going to say it, but I'm going to say it. Yes, you can do research reading the codex, and you should. But another great way to do research, if you're interested in Drukhari, is to head over to Scarredcast, because Skari has so many incredibly informative, deep dive, super easy to follow, highly entertaining videos on so many aspects of this faction. Obviously, there's no way we're going to cover everything here, but I think that for players who are really interested about getting serious and nuanced about Drukhari, there really is probably no better resource than Skari's channel. And if you're feeling really committed, you could support him on Patreon, which would give you access to his Discord, which I am not just saying this, is literally the most friendly Discord I have ever been part of. I joined it, like 3 people were like, so what are you doing here? What do what's your 40K thing? What armies do you play? Really tell me more about that. It was like I was either being indoctrinated into a cult.
It's the
It
cult
was
of
like
the
speed
Dark
date,
Eldar.
40K speed dating, except people are just being nice. No, it's so great. So if you don't already have a bunch of 40K Patreons that you're supporting, and you are interested in Drukhari, I really don't think you can do better than supporting Skari.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Yeah, the Denizen community is awesome. It's great. We have it's such a tightly knit community. We like over 300 patrons right now. We're all like very we do stuff all the time. It's really fun. I'm glad that you feel that way. Like when you come in, because if I don't say hi, then somebody else says hi, and we try and get people involved and stuff, and show off hobby things and whatnot. It's really fun to like have a place where I can be like, "This is what I'm doing." Everybody's like, "Yay!" Like you get a little bit of like, yeah. Other than that, like, stick to it, Craftworlds. Like, stick to it. Put your head down. Just like grind through it. It's gonna happen. You're gonna get a new shiny book. I know how that feels because I did that with my Dark Eldar Codex for like forever.
Yeah.
So I know it's the sunshine on the other side.
In the meantime, I greatly appreciate that Drukhari are willing to come help us out when the craft worlds get invaded, instead of only hunting us down to feed our souls to Slaanesh for fun.
Have you ever read the story in the Warzone Valador from Apocalypse back in the day?
I have not.
Okay. This is really funny because in this book, the Craftworld and the Drukhari kind of like ally, but only because the Craftworld would like, we'll give you a special weapon that you've been looking for, or whatever. And the Drukhari were like, sure.
Sounds on brand.
Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. But one of the things that was really funny is the Comrade Eldar that fought alongside the Warhost of Bieltan took a perverse delight in adorning their armor with the colors of Eondin to mockingly maintain that they were the colors in support of the Craft world.
It's so horrible. It's so awful. I think of Craftworld Eldar, like, I don't know, suburban
it's like
middle class
trolling,
kids.
they're like edgelording the Craftworlders, be like, oh yes, we feel so sorry for Eondin. Because ironically, they're fighting Tyranids, right? They're fighting Tyranids in Valador, so it's hilarious.
Yeah, it makes it worse.
Trolling the hell out of them.
So bad.
Anyway, yes, we'll come fight for you. Just
we appreciate it. Yeah,
yeah,
no, it's cool. Sometimes I feel like I don't know. I kind of feel like Craftworld Eldar are the the kid from the suburbs who is kept on the straight and narrow because he's always on a schedule. He's got the violin lessons and the lacrosse lessons and study time. And Drukhari are like your weird, disreputable cousin from the city who wants you to like, I don't know, do acid and feed pigeons Alka-Seltzer.
It's like the kind of kid that you like hang out with. You're like, your parents weren't around much, were they?
But he's glamorous and like kind of cool, but at the same time,
everybody like wants to talk with him.
Yeah,
it's the life of the party, but you don't want to be them when they're like 40.
But you want him there for you. It's like if you're that
you want him in your corner.
You do because if you're a teenager in a Graham Greene novel trying to come of age in a quirky way, like your cousin from the city, like he's a problem. He might threaten your prestigious university admissions. But if your story is written by like Dan Abnett or George Martin, like you need that guy. And I feel like that's where Craftworlders are right now in Ninth Ed. We need a little help. So, Harlequins are great, but Drukhari, man, this is a useful alliance for us. I'm not quite sure what you guys are getting out of it, but maybe someday.
Well, that's to be said. The bargain must be struck, but it will be struck, and then we'll just turn on you at any turn we can.
Well, at least we know it's coming.
That's
Thanks,
right.
Skari.
Yeah, at least we're consistent.
I really appreciate coming on the channel and sharing your tremendous wisdom and cleverness and general thingness with us. It's been awesome. So much appreciated.
Anytime. This was really fun. Keep on doing what you're doing. It's nice to see some more cool, focused content out there. And honestly, when especially with the way the saturation of the 40K market is right now, I feel like the more focused your channel is, like the Sister Act podcast that does like Sisters of Battle stuff, like you're doing Craftworld Eldar. It's really nice to find these like experts in the field that are really sort of like making themselves known for that one thing. That's kind of where I stood with Dark Eldar, right? And it's nice to have that sort of gravitational pull, right? If you need to know something about Craftworld, you can go to you, Brent. If you need to know something about Sisters, you go over here. If you need to know something about Dark Eldar, you probably know who Archon Skari is. I would hope.
Yeah, you do.
So other than that, so other than that, that's awesome, man. I love it. And thanks for inviting me. This has been really fun. And anytime, monkish cousins will be there for you.
You appreciate it. All right,
no problem.
We'll see you next time.
No problem. Bye.
Take care.